Awesome. So thank you everybody for joining us. Wasn't sure, Phil, if you wanted to say any opening remarks before we jump in.
Just really quick, welcome everybody. This session is being handled by McKinsey and Co. And this is dealing with the interview process to get in. It's just understand, guys, this whole program is a little bit modeled after one that has existed for a number of years at McKinsey, not at McKinsey, sorry, at McGill. They both start with MCs. But and so one of the processes, because there's a lot of group work involved, we're just, we might make mistakes in our selection, but we're trying to make sure that we are including people that are going to work well together as a team. And so this part of it is an important part. And so Sammy and Sunan from McKinsey have offered to present this. So I'm going quiet the rest of this session. Take it away, guys.
Awesome. So before we dive in, a couple of ground rules. So obviously we know that we're doing this remotely. So in order to make this less painful for everybody, if folks can keep their cameras on, use chat to ask us questions, mute yourself when you're not speaking, and use the raise your hand function or whatever to call it out if we need to chat. But otherwise, why don't we dive in? So maybe I'll have Sunan introduce himself first, and then I'll introduce myself, and we can go from there. Sunan, you there? Might have lost Sunan.
I don't think it's
Here we go.
Perfect. Hi everyone. Nice to see everyone here. So I graduated from the University of Calgary. I'm currently a BA at McKinsey. I did an undergrad in health sciences. So did a lot of research in undergrad. And near the end of my undergrad, I started getting interested in where health interacted with business, and in my final semester did the project you folks are doing now, or interviewing for now, which is like the pro bono project with McKinsey, and was the manager on that project. Decided to kind of switch away from health, come to McKinsey, and in August of last year started. So I've been here for about 7 months now. Since joining, I've worked in two major areas. One is in digital. Sammy's also in digital, and well, interestingly, Sammy was the manager on the project that we did last year, and he's also one of my managers on the projects I've done at McKinsey. So, done work in energy, insurance, digital transformations, etc. I also do a lot of work in healthcare startups. So for the past couple of months, I've been working with developing clients in health tech startup space, and figuring out how McKinsey can actually help in both this large companies, but also small emerging tech companies in the healthcare sector. So outside of that work, doing some of this pro bono work as well as recruiting. So if any of you are interested in coming to McKinsey, feel free to reach out. I've just been onboarded this week as the new relationship manager for the UFC. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I interviewed in August, so it's somewhat fresh in my memory. I've never interviewed, but that's why we have Sammy here, who's one of the veteran interviewers from the UFC, from McKinsey, and he runs hundreds of interviews each year. So I'll pass it to him.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Sunan. So Sammy Sharif, I'm an engagement manager at the firm. I've been here for 4.5 years. Before that, I was with IBM for about 2 years, also as a management consultant. My area of expertise is digital transformations. During my time at McKinsey, I've worked across 11 or 12, I lose track of different industries, whether it's mining, oil and gas, utilities, or it's public sector government, or it's insurance, or it's banking, or it's telecom, variety of different places, and a variety of different functions, from strategy down to procurement, operations, what have you. And my current kind of topic of interest is digital talent and digital operating models. So bringing the best of the best digital talent to aged companies that are maybe somewhat dinosauric at times when it comes to their tech functions, and getting them to think through, okay, how do I get my talent to be happy and be productive given my old operating model, and shifting some of that thinking. That's a little bit about me. As far as the recruiting process goes, like Sunan mentioned, I'm one of the veteran interviewers in the Canadian practice. Typically do I can't even track, somewhere over 100 interviews a year. I know the recruitment process inside and out. I was also a U of C student at one point. I did my master's at the U of C, did my undergrad at the U of A. And, the reason why we've pulled you all in here today and for this session, it's not to sell you on McKinsey or recruit you to McKinsey. It's because we want to use the McKinsey approach to kind of demystify consulting interviews in general and set everybody straight on the kinds of answers, the kinds of approaches we want you to be taking in your upcoming interviews, because it's very different than what a lot of people expect, right? And the reason why we're doing that is because we believe that in order for you to be judged fairly in the interview, you have to be able to put your best foot forward. But if everybody has different levels of understanding of what's going to be expected of them and how to perform, how do we know if you're actually all running the same type of race, right? If somebody prepares for a marathon and somebody else prepares for a sprint, and you end up having one or the other in the interview, that doesn't mean you couldn't have done either, right? So how do we make sure that you're on the same sort of understanding of what's expected, what kind of the answers you're looking for, what are we hoping to hear, when the interviews are being conducted? And then obviously a lot of this is going to be a Q&A for me and Sunan. So, the second half of the session is really ask us questions about the interview process or consulting in general, but mostly focused on the interview process in the beginning. With that in mind, we'll jump right in. So typically speaking, the interviews are composed in consulting of two types, right? So it doesn't matter what firm you go interview with. If you're involved in consulting, there's usually at least two types of interviews. Those types are the experience interview and the case interview, right? Experience interview is usually where you talk about your past examples of achievements in detail. The case is where you solve some sort of business problem. Depending on the role that you're interviewing for here, you're going to have one or the other part of your interview process for the course. What I want to talk a little bit about is what in a consulting sense, when we're recruiting you for a company we're looking for, and somewhat of what we're trying to mimic in the course. So going a little bit further, if we were to have a McKinsey interview, it would be two components. We'd have the personal experience component, we'd have a structured case component. And some of these, given the course, have been shrunken down for you. It won't be exactly the same. It won't be 15 to 20 minutes. It'll be 15 minutes in your interviews. However, in the personal experience section or the structured case section, the things that we're looking for are things like the following: your entrepreneurial drive, your personal impact, your leadership, and then your problem solving skills, like common sense, comfort with numbers, etc. Now, I really want to take a second here and talk about what I mean when I say entrepreneurial drive, personal impact, or leadership. What we're really looking for is not the basics that everybody talks about, right? Everybody's like, when you go in an interview, a lot of people will say, well, I'm a great leader, or I showed great collaboration skills because I did X, Y, Z, or, I showed a lot of entrepreneurism because I started doing X, or my personal impact was Y. That is somebody who is trying to convince me as the interviewer rather than letting the facts do the convincing on their behalf, okay? So when we're looking for these different elements, we're looking for you to tell us about stories where those things are self-evident. The best interviewees, the best candidates, are the people whose stories speak for themselves, right? So you're not telling me, hey, I used my great interpersonal skills to convince somebody of X or convince somebody of Y. You say, look, so-and-so was very upset. And in order to make them not upset, I thought I should do this, and then I did this, and they reacted in this way. And as a result, I found that they were happier, and we accomplished our goal. Now, if you tell me a story with that level of detail, that level of meat behind it, I'll automatically understand, you might be a good leader, or you might be able to deliver like that empathy we need in order to create personal impact. Does that sort of resonate with folks on the line to kind of understand what I'm talking about? And so when the questions are going to get asked in the interview, I would encourage you all, and we're not going to give you the specific questions you're being asked, but I would encourage you all to think about, okay, don't try to sell who you are, okay? Don't try to convince us of, what you think we're at, whatever we're looking for or whatever. Answer the question being asked, be factual, and describe what actually happened in a way that allows us to understand the implication, that you have a certain skill set, that you have a certain ability. I'll pause there to see, Sunand, Phil, if you have any other comments you want to add.
Trying to find the controls, sorry. No, that's, I think that's pretty clear. Instead of telling me what you think you are, show me.
Exactly.
I think one thing I'll add is, I think the biggest asset here is if you can really reflect on what your thought process was in the moment and like really be able to be familiar with that and then convey that, that's the most important part of these interviews. Is like, are you so familiar that you knew what you were thinking and why you acted the way you did in that scenario? It really helps build a great picture of you to the interviewer.
Exactly. To really build on what Sunand just said, because that hit the nail on the head. There's some people who do the right things unintentionally and others who are intentional about it, right? If you can walk us through your thought process as to why you did something, what you thought about before and after, and how things played out, then I know you're being intentional. You're not somebody who lucked into doing the right thing at the right time and lucked into the right outcome, right? Some people say, hey, I'm just good with people. So it's like, okay, well, how did you build a relationship? Well, I just did this thing and it always works. It's like, well, that's not being intentional. It's the thing that you know always works and you did it, but you don't know why it works. You don't know what the thinking behind it is. And I'm not confident in a different scenario, in a different situation, will you be able to repeat that process and that level of success, right? And so if somebody's like, hey, I did this because I know, I took this client to a hockey game because I know they've been mentioning for a long time they wanted to go. They're a big fan. Their out-of-state city was in town. And so, blah, 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 blah. And so I thought of those things. And I also know that they'd never been at like this part or at this time. And so I took these into consideration. It really mattered to them. It made our relationship stronger. Then I'm like, okay, I think I understand that this person was thinking through the implications of what they were doing rather than just thinking, well, I took them to the hockey game and I thought they'd owe me because that's, if I went to a hockey game, I think I'd owe somebody, right? And so it's just a little bit more thoughtful. And that's not necessarily the best example. There's many more micro examples from meetings or from personal interactions, from presentations that you might be able to pull. But really talking through the way you're thinking is helpful. All right. Phil, Sunand, anything else to add before I move on?
No.
All righty, we'll keep rolling. I think I don't want to spend too much time on the case because there are like an infinite number of resources online which will tell you all about how to do cases. And I'm sure the UCCA will have their own resources. Generally speaking, at a high level, we're looking for the few things, right? Find the problem, structure the problem, analyze the information, develop a conclusion. It's not rocket science. I would recommend, if you're not comfortable with it, the only way to get comfort is to find someone who is comfortable with it and do cases with them, right? The only way to do this is live practice. I remember the first time I did a case, I bungled it so badly despite doing it all on my own. Like I did multiple cases in my own head on paper and I was like, oh yeah, I got this figured out. And it definitely didn't go that well when I went out loud for the first time. So I recommend doing some live practices, but generally this is the framework here. I'll pause to see Sunand if you have anything else to add.
I think that's perfect.
Sorry, I didn't catch you there.
Nope, fully agree with everything. Yeah.
Sammy, can I just
Of course, Phil.
interject? Guys, be careful. It's different than cases that we do in school for study in a particular class, right? Because there we give you the case, we tell you go home, come back, hand in the report, do a presentation or whatever. And it's all the information should be there. When you're doing an interview, probably not going to give you nearly as much information. One, because you don't have hours to sit there and read it, right? So just understand the process is a little different, even though their case, how you solve them is the same, but you can't assume that everything got given to you at the start the way we would in class.
Exactly. And also don't assume that the interviewer even has extra information to give you. The number of times where somebody's like, hey, do we have this information? And I'm like, look, man, I have 2 pages to support this case, right? The ones with the questions on them, and that's about it. And so if I haven't given you the information, I might not have it, right? Maybe I can share it with you. You can ask me for it. Sometimes I can, but most of the time I can't, right? And so it is definitely a shift in mindset. So again, I recommend going on YouTube, going online, spending a little bit of time familiarizing. Shouldn't take a whole bunch of your time, but it's important to build some familiarity with the approach. All righty. We'll keep rolling. So now what I want to do is just high level, how to be your best self in the interview, right? I think a few things that may seem obvious, but I recommend everybody takes a moment to really internalize some of the things we're mentioning here. So one, try to enjoy the interview and be present, right? I think a lot of people see an interview as a test, and to me, that's the wrong mindset, right? An interview is a conversation, and as a qualified candidate, you want to be thinking about yourself as evaluating whatever body or organization is evaluating you, you are evaluating them back in the interview. Are they asking the right type of questions? Are they treating you the right way, et cetera, et cetera? And, are they getting to know you in the right way? So if you approach it as getting, helping somebody get to know you, it takes a lot of the edge of the interview off, the stakes off, and allows you to really be yourself. That takes me to the second point, be yourself and let that shine through. Don't try to be what you think we're looking for. Very often, one of the funny things about consulting is very often people will not be successful in their first time applying to consulting, and they will be their second or third time. And that's not because they've fundamentally changed as the person they were the first time they applied, but because they are more accurately representing the person that they did in the first time. So again, going back to my earlier comment, a lot of times people say, well, I use my excellent networking skills to do X, and then they tell me all about it. And I'm looking at something completely different. I'm trying to figure out their empathy or their ability to connect with somebody. And they're telling me about their networking skills or their presentation skills, their communication skills. Again, telling me rather than demonstrating it. So don't worry about that. Tell me what happened, be yourself, tell the interviewer what actually happened and answer their question. Shifting the mindset, I've already touched on. And then finally, figure out a way to get as comfortable as possible, right? And so in the interview itself, and here, maybe I'll plead my ignorance here, Phil, I'm not sure. I think they're remote, right? Or are they going to be in person?
Sorry, correct. They're remote.
Remote, yeah. So, here, find a place in your house or, somewhere else, wherever you feel comfortable. And when you're doing your practice, try to do it in that area. Make sure that you're not booking yourself double before and after. Give yourself ample time to unwind and prep in advance. Those sorts of things, just set yourself up for success. One of my favorite tips that I always tell candidates that it blows their mind that they can do this, is if there's certain things that you struggle with, like for example, me, I used to talk, I perhaps still do, too quickly in interviews. I put a sticky on my screen right beside my camera that says talk slowly, right? Find ways to make your life easier, to focus on the conversation rather than stressing about it as a test or like, am I in the right place? Can they see me? Test your tech out in advance, all those sorts of things so that you can just be yourself. With all of that said, maybe I'll pause and see, Sunan, if you have any questions or anything to add, sorry.
Yeah, no, maybe I'll add 2 things. One is another trick. So Sammy told me this during my interview. And so it was, grab like a water bottle and don't feel afraid to use drinking water as a pause, as a place to think and really take a breather during your interview. I don't think his advice is specifically about the water bottle, but it's more so about the fact that feel comfortable to take time, pause, don't rush through your interview. It's not about getting as many ideas off your chest. It's about getting the most quality ideas. And then also, I think at the same time, even though there is some focus on saying things that matter and not saying everything, there's also this freedom that you have in an interview. Specifically in a consulting interview, I think there's a freedom to say things that are sometimes outlandish, sometimes creative, And that's specifically because we are looking for people who are creative, who are willing to think outside the box. So if you think something's dumb, don't filter it, right? A lot of these things that you think might be dumb are actually ways to show how creative and like willing to think outside the box you actually are. So hopefully both of those things are like somewhat empowering and like make you feel less stressed in the process.
Just a caution on the water bottles. I saw Phil take a drink, and that water bottle is fine. However, we've got all these, I don't know, whatever you get at Canadian Tire or Safeway or what, and as soon as you grab it, it sounds like somebody is doing this. So don't hold on to those in your hand because it will highlight how nervous you are, because it'll just be crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. So if you want a water bottle, get one like Phil's or a coffee cup or something that isn't going to make noise.
Exactly. Awesome. So I think we covered most of the material we wanted to get through. And the reason why we kept it relatively general is because if we give you too much prescriptive advice, you'll get again, you'll perform again in the interview similar to what you think we want rather than who you are, right? So I really want to emphasize, be yourself, share the truth of who you are with us, and be confident that based off of that, the right decision will get made, right? And let me stop there and kind of open this up for questions related to, the course, the interview process, how to prep, and then consulting in general. We've got quite a bit of time left, so I'm happy to take a lot of questions. All right, go ahead, Sushane.
Hey, Sammy, good evening. Thanks for the session. I had a quick question. I see that the interview booked for us is only for 15 minutes, and I just want to double check. You said it will be either a case or the behavioral type. Is that correct?
That's correct. So Phil, I think if they're 15 minutes, they're probably the behavioral, correct? Or are they the case? It depends on the person, right?
Sorry, I keep muting myself so I don't make noise. It's there's a very short case to it. There's only one behavioral question. Yeah.
And that's also not that unusual. Just want to add to Phil's comment. For like McKinsey's cases where we do 20 minutes, it's based off of one question. We do 20 minutes on one question, right? So it's not unusual. It's not like, and the question isn't going to be, what's your biggest weakness? Okay, like it's not going to be stuff like that. It's not going to be like, tell me a time you failed at something, right? It's not questions like that that you're going to find on an HR list on LinkedIn. It's trying to be a little bit more thoughtful. And so, but the one question. All right, Liam.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Sammy. So I know you said your first experience with an interview case example went really wrong. I'm just curious if you could elaborate on what went wrong for you.
So yeah, so what happened was I forgot that a case interview should be a bit of a conversation, and I started thinking in my own head. So then I'm trying to answer the question, but at the same time thinking in my head, I'm like, oh crap, the interview doesn't know what I'm thinking. So then I start talking out loud, but then I was rambling. And it didn't make a lot of sense. So then I panicked because I heard myself rambling. And then I was like, okay, well, I've forgotten what I was trying to do in the actual case. So let me stop for a second and reevaluate. Do I understand how to approach this problem? And the problem, for those of you, like, this is the case McKinsey doesn't do anymore. So I can tell you, it was basically like, it was like a zoo that was evaluating whether they should get pandas or not, right? Whether the business case for pandas exists. That was the case question. And I remember I asked an Indian question, which was like, well, do we know, I think the question was, I asked the interviewer, I was like, do we know what the revenues associated to like other animal additions was? Like, for example, if we added lions, did our revenue go up substantially? And the interviewer just looked at me deadpan and was like, why is that relevant? And I just like panicked. At that point, like everything shut down, because I was like, is it not relevant? Am I stupid? I don't know. And then it just melted down. So that's my little fun story of how my first case didn't go so well. All right.
Perfect.
Peter. No worries.
Hey, Sammy, thank you for the session. I thought you brought up an interesting point when you said don't try to convince the interviewer, let the facts do the convincing on your behalf. I was wondering if you had a personal example of where you could prove that just telling the facts actually does that for you so we could better understand it.
Yeah, for sure. Sunan, did you want to take a second for that one, or did you want me to take that one?
No, go for it, Sammy. Yeah, I can add after.
Sure. So an example of somewhere where the facts tell the story, right? I'll tell you my current client situation. I landed a current client, and the client was somebody who was very upset at what we were like, the work that had been done previously. They came in, my first meeting with them, basically I presented a presentation to them that I thought was fine. The client reamed me out, and at the end of it was just like, welcome to X client, and laughed about it a little bit and was just like, I hope you're not going to cry from this, right? And I remember laughing a little bit in my head as like I'm like, this is not really a problem because we'll get around to it. And the reason why I felt like that, and the way that you could tell the story to an interviewer is, well, what did I do next? In that moment, I realized, okay, this person is angry at me and it has nothing to do with the facts. It has nothing to do with the presentation. It has nothing to do with what they need to do. They just have a history of feeling bad about it. So how did I analyze that? Well, I knew that the presentation was good. I knew the facts were accurate. I knew that this is what we needed to discuss, but they just didn't care. They kept pointing out little things that just made them angry. So how do I make them like me? Well, first of all, I realized that the client, they feed off each other. There's a couple of them in the room. If you keep them all in the room together, there's just this synergy of like anger that happens. So the best way to tackle that was I decided to tackle them one at a time. I had individual meetings with them once a week, where in the beginning I was like, look guys, first meeting didn't go so well. Can you tell me what went wrong and what happened? Why are you so angry? Without actually saying that, that was the question. Now I allowed them to unload, but also by asking that question, I depersonalized it. They were telling me about what happened in the past that had nothing to do with me. And they knew that when they were telling it to me. Then I followed up by saying, okay, well, how can I improve things, right? What are some things that I can do? I didn't necessarily promise anything, but I heard them out. Based on the feedback I got from all three of them, I started integrating things and then pointing it out to them very clearly where I was changing things and how I was changing them in response to their feedback. I also thanked them anytime they gave me a negative or a positive comment to make them feel like they're being heard. By the end of it, I got feedback on another presentation that went to the directors of like 60 state agencies representing 100,000 employees. That presentation went out. And these guys, the same one said, in the history of them working with our company, which is 7 years, they had never seen a better presentation, right? This is in the span of a month. And the reason why that story tells you the facts rather than me telling you about my skills is because I explained, obviously this is going to sound like me bragging, but I'm trying not to. It's explained why I thought through their motivations and how I thought through them, how I thought to interact with them, how I listened to them, how I engaged them, what the impact was, what the results were, what the timeline is, what was at stake, right? All of those elements became apparent. And so if I'm an interviewer, I might think of that and say, okay, this person knows how to manage difficult clients. They don't crack under pressure. They see this opportunity as a challenge. They are able to change their presentation and relationship style based on the people that they're working with, rather than just doing a one-size-all approach. They don't escalate when they get yelled at, right? Because some people might have just escalated when they said, oh, like I hope that doesn't make you cry. Like you'd be like, oh, that's unprofessional. And you can go, but at the same time, you're in client service. Yeah, you can do that, but it's not going to help you build the relationship. It's not help you get across the line. So those sorts of things where you tell a story without saying, well, I use my great presentation skills to knock it out of the park.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Anything to add, Sunand or Phil? Awesome. Philippe.
Yeah, thanks again for this presentation. I had a quick question about, you kind of hinted at the idea of the stress during a case interview and rambling. I have a tendency as well to go on tangents, and I can imagine that that's something that's easy to do when you have this new information and you're trying to convey it in a direct way, but you have so many new ideas coming through even as you're discussing it. Do you have any tips as to how to tackle even, to mitigate those tangents and to try to stay clear throughout, giving that that answer or having that
Yes.
conversation in that interview?
Absolutely. So I got two topics or two ideas to support you with. One is what you can do before the interview, and one is what you could do during. So what you can do before the interview, and people in your personal life and professional life might hate you for this, is taking a top-down communication approach for everything. So somebody, if your wife is like, or your girlfriend or your friends are like, hey, where do you want to go for, like, why do you want to go for dinner at so-and-so place? You say, well, there's 3 reasons. 1, 2, 3. And because of that, I want to go there. The reason why you force yourself to communicate in that top-down way is because if you can make it natural all the time, then you can turn it on and off, right? You can turn it on when you need to in the interview and turn it off when, you know, with your family. But it's like, you got to practice it a lot before it becomes natural. And so forcing top-down communication, and for those of you who aren't familiar with that approach, look it up, but it's basically starting with the answer first, right? The what, then the why, then the how, right? That's the tactical communication approach to keep yourself focused. Are you, it's not just about the ideas, it's about communicating those ideas. So if you're communicating them with the what first, you'll automatically narrow yourself down a lot more, because you're not talking about things that are irrelevant, because you're talking about the what. And if you're going from what to what to what, that's still important. But if you start talking about the how behind it before you jump to the what, and then maybe the why somewhere else, it's very confusing for an interviewer. So being top down in your communication, in your day-to-day life will be helpful. Now, as far as in the interview itself, this is where the tip that Sunan gave, which is take a little bit of time, don't feel pressure to answer right away. And then what I used to do is, because I used to have the same thing happen, I would be in an interview, I'd come up with 20 ideas. Then I'm like, I can't just say 20 ideas. That's going to make me sound like a crazy person. So what I would do is, when I was writing them on my page or wherever I was taking notes, I would then say, okay, after I've come up with the ideas, can I bucket them into relevant categories? Right? So if I want to explore the finances and the operations of a company, my ideas might have been like, oh, what's their budget like? Do they have any savings? Do they, you know, what is their trajectory? Blah, 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 blah. And then I look at all those ideas and I say, okay, oh, those are financial ideas. Then I say, okay, well, how are their workers trained? What skills do they have? How many workers do they have? Blah, 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 blah. Like, oh, those are operational questions. So then when I present it after taking a minute or two, I could say, well, really, I thought of 3 groups of ideas. I thought of operational ideas, financial ideas, and marketing. Like, oh, okay, great. And all of a sudden the interviewer thinks you're brilliant, but really you just took an extra second or 30 seconds to categorize your ideas.
Thank you.
All right. No worries. Danny.
Hey, Sammy, thanks. My questions relate to specifics of a case. I'm guessing that the role you're being interviewed for, doing the case for, you know, the specifics would relate directly to the role that you're interviewing for. Is there a tactic in interviewing or in selecting cases for a candidate to deviate from that? And on top of that, you know, how would you prepare for specifics? Because I looked at some of the resources, right, and there's soup to nuts as far as content, mergers and acquisitions, small business, high finance. It was pretty intimidating, to be honest, but you know, how to prepare for specifics, and if there is, like I say, a tendency to deviate to see if the candidate responds well or something.
So what I would say is most good consulting firms will try not to play games in the interview, and they will try not to throw you off. That doesn't mean that it won't always happen. Sometimes a partner decides to have a little bit of fun in an interview, and then HR slaps them on the wrist afterwards. So like, testing you in the interview is not something that's supposed to happen. It doesn't happen at McKinsey, shouldn't happen at any other firm, can happen, shouldn't be there. Now, as far as individualized cases for specific topic areas, that's not how McKinsey operates. That's not how most of the strategy firms will operate. Some of the bigger firms who have like 10,000 people in a specific area will do it that way when you're interviewing for that specific area. But McKinsey is like, we are total 27,000 people or something. Compare that to like Deloitte is like 500,000. So when you do that comparison, you realize it depends on the firm you're interviewing with. Generally speaking, the best approach, in my opinion, is to take a generalist approach, which is to take a variety of cases from different areas. What nobody wants to hear, and I'm telling you this very seriously, a lot of people think we're looking for like people to pull the relevant case framework from Michael Porter's 5 Forces or whatever and pull it in and say, hey, this is how you solve the case. And this is the brilliant framework that Gartner approved in 2013 that you should use. No, it's about basic problem solving. It's like, can you break the problem into its core components? Can you categorize them? Can you prioritize them? Can you tell me why they're relevant? Can you tell me how they're interacting with each other? Based on the data I give you, can you make some intelligent decisions just based on the limited information you have, right? Are you comfortable enough making recommendations, assuming that's the world that you have to live with? And then can you also tell me what else would be nice to listen to, right? Very often are my cases, when I run them with a candidate, I ask them 3 questions. That's it. That's the whole case, 35 minutes, right? It's like an upfront question where I've given them some data. There's maybe a math question in there and maybe some sort of like analysis question based off of like some charts or something, right? Very limited in terms of the scope. But it's really about, do you have the core problem solving skill set of being able to look at a problem, break it down? Can you crack the math if you need to? Can you analyze charts? Can you come up with what we call the so what? And so if you're trying to get ready for a specific domain, sure, if you know you want to go for mergers and acquisitions, and that's what you want to do, and go do cases in that. But don't worry about being like, hey, they're going to ask me about, you know, mergers and acquisitions in Europe, and I don't know anything about that. How am I going to do this case? Or they're going to ask me about military operations and the supply chain of like the United States military. Like, no, even if we do, we literally, and most good consulting firms are this way, we don't expect any actual material knowledge, right? McKinsey goes as far as to say, we've had candidates who've interviewed with us, and they've asked us in the interview, what is the difference between revenue and profit? And they passed the interview. Okay, I want to make that obvious. They didn't know the difference between profit and revenue, and they passed the interview. The reason is because their intrinsics of problem solving, once we explained it to them, was there. So don't focus on building subject matter expertise. Given any topic, can you break it down? Can you approach it, or will you be scared? And the final thing I'll say on this is, one of my favorite practice cases that I did that really threw me off was, it was about a meat processing plant. And it was like, they take, like, they literally have a batch of cows outside and then they ship out hamburgers, right? And it's like, can you optimize this? That was basically the case. And I was like, this is so weird because I don't know anything about the meat processing industry. This is really weird to think about. And they're like, you know, they want you to focus on the operational chain. And it's like, well, I don't know what happens. They're like, well, have you ever had a hamburger? It's like, yes. So what do you think happens between when you get a cow and when you get a burger? Right? Can you think about that chain? It's like, oh yeah, I can think about that. I don't have any expertise there. And so really, that sort of is what I would say, in my experience, the highest value training you can give is put yourself in awkward sort of cases and see if you can handle them. You may not get everything that's written on the answer sheet, but it'll probably build the skill set you need to pass the interview. And after that long thing, maybe I'll give it to Sunan to see if he's got anything else to add.
I fully agree with that. I think, like, just to reflect on my interview process, you know, I went through the same scenario as you, Danny. Like, I came from like a very non-business background. Like, I had no idea about anything. Like a week before my interview, I was surprised with like what NPV meant. I'm sure everyone in the call knows what NPV is, but I barely knew a couple days before. And I don't think any of that, like the knowledge, ended up actually mattering. Any of the business knowledge didn't actually end up mattering. I'll then like speak to the fact, like, okay, does getting a lot of industry, like, you know, doing insurance and then doing like pandas and doing, you know, like all these different industries, I don't really think that helped me. I think that, like, I didn't feel any more confident doing more industries over my interview process. I also didn't feel any more confident doing different types of cases, like, you know, like tackling profit revenue problems or like growth problems or making a decision on new product problems. I didn't see myself getting that much better, getting a wide variety there. What I did see was super helpful was once I started hypothesizing is what my toolkit for breaking down problems was, right? Then I started feeling comfortable that regardless of what problem, even if it was one that I could have never practiced for, I would be able to break it down. I think that's exactly what Sam was saying. Like, to make it very tangible for you, what that means is like, okay, can I take a problem and break it down algebraically? Yes or no, right? And try like practicing that. And then like, can I break it down by process? Like the burger thing, right? Like, can I do that effectively? Can I do it conceptually? Can I like segment markets? Can I use like internal, external? Figuring out what all these different frameworks are and being very comfortable with breaking down problems with them and mixing and matching is the thing that probably made me the most comfortable. And regardless of what type of case hit me, I felt like I could break it down. And I think that was the light for me in my interview process.
Thank you both. I'll take comfort in the fact that I can tell revenue from profit. So thanks a lot.
No worries. Shusrit, hopefully I pronounced that right.
I had one specific question about the interview for the course itself. Will there be a question period associated with the ending of the interview, or do we not have a chance to voice any questions we might have? And then my other question was more specific to Mackenzie. I know I applied, I think, a year and a half ago, and I managed to get to the I think it was like a game section, strategy game. And I kind of wanted to know what the thought process of like working through those kind of problem solving questions is like, and what a successful candidate in Mackenzie would like do, I guess.
Right. So maybe I can answer the first question first and then go into the second one. So the first question was, is there going to be a Q&A section in the interview? Given that we've a lot of interviews to get through in a short period of time, there's not going to be a lot of dedicated time for candidate questions. That's why we've kind of set up this session here for people to ask us questions, get to know a little bit. And then obviously after the fact, you can reach out to Phil and us as well to learn a little bit more. And we're going to be connected at the hip once the course actually gets started. So you'll find lots of opportunities to ask and get your questions answered. So that's that part. As far as the game goes, so the game is one additional data point as far as the evaluation process goes. It's not in of itself evaluative. Like we don't necessarily gate people based off of the game, but it's like the idea is that we're assessing problem solving capability. And so there was a lot of like internal analysis done to see, are we measuring the right skill sets that correlate with success in the case? Typically, if somebody is good at doing a case, then they're going to be good at the game. And so a lot of that skill overlaps. And so the game was built in a way to be able to assess that. And so if we need, the interviews happen and we're like, okay, the person is potentially a borderline case. We think they might pass, but we're not 100% sure. Then we look at the performance in the game and say, oh, this person killed the game, which means in a slightly different setup with the same sort of skills, they're clearly very competent here. Let's move them on, because I think if that was the question mark, we have a third data point that's supporting them. So that's typically the way that the game is leveraged. If you've got further questions on that, I can definitely connect with you offline or put you in touch with the recruiting team who'd be able to answer more. But at a high level, that's how the game works.
Right. Thank you.
And one thing I want to note is I actually have never done the game. The game was introduced relatively recently. It used to be just like a basic question and answer test. They realized that the game is a lot more functional, provides you much more usable information. And so I can't actually comment on the game itself because I've never had a chance to be able to do it.
Yeah, I played the game about a year ago. It's actually fairly fun to go through. It's very interactive. Thank you.
Awesome.
Just before you go to the next question, I just want to clarify, because we have several MBA students that are currently students of mine. I will not be in your interview. Okay, just to clarify, because I recognize several of you on the screen, and that's good. Glad to see you here. I'm just going to stay out of that interview.
Awesome. Any other questions from you, Shootsmith? Otherwise, we'll go to next person.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Disha?
Hi, thank you for the session again. I just wanted to clarify, I guess I'm an undergrad, and I know you mentioned that there's one behavioral question for the EMBAs. I noticed that in our interview process, it's just 3 case questions in the 15 minutes. So I just like to clarify, would that be 3 mini questions related to one particular case, or 3 questions related to 3 individual cases?
Yeah, 3 questions in the same case.
Same case? Okay, perfect. I think that's about it. Thank you so much.
No worries. All right. Looks like we've answered all the questions that anybody on this line has. And so that's always positive. Feel free to throw one into the chat if anybody's got one, or raise your hand if you want to talk about anything else that we haven't covered. But I wanted to take a moment to just thank you all for your interest. I think personally, I love consulting. I find it to be a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys all enjoy the interview process and as well as the course that we have planned. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know most of the people on this line a little bit better. With that, I can give this group some time back, or whatever you guys feel is useful.
Anybody have any questions on the course itself?
May I ask a question?
Go for it.
I should raise my. Is this a course will be a daytime course or nighttime course? In the evening.
Yeah, no, it's not an evening class, but it would be. I haven't seen the final schedule come out, but we expect it to be like 3 to 6, somewhere in that slot. So it's once a week, 2 3/4 hours, right? The normal set up that way, but it's not an evening. One of the things, we just want to make sure people recognize, and I know it got asked on the online application, but this is a really strong group course, which means there's a lot of communication going on between your group members, between your group and a client, between your group and a mentor. Make sure if you're doing this that you're able to do that kind of time, right? It's just because everybody's been in a group where somebody always was too busy to be there. Like, could be smart, have great intentions, just too busy. So I'm just encouraging you, don't be that person. I'm just asking you, right? I'm not talking to you specifically. Yeah, sorry. I mean, in general to everybody, just take in consideration, right? Whether you're, team lead or you are, one of the undergrads, either way, guys, this is something where we really need people to be able to put in time. On the same hand, we're not running, this isn't a double course, right? So we're not expecting you to put in 30 hours a week on this. But don't think that you're going to do little bits and pieces at midnight. I mean, I did my MBA between 10 and 12 at night. You cannot do this course that way.
Thanks.
All right, we got a question from Liam.
Yeah, just a quick question. How many students do you expect to have in the course in total here?
Between 25 and 30. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Which makes it bigger than McGill's only allows 20. They get 100 applicants. They interview 40. They accept 20. I'd get in trouble if I did that. So it's all a function of university budgets. So we're looking between 25 and 30. That gives us 5 or 6 teams, right? So that's what we're looking for.
If I might ask a question.
Yep, go for it.
If I'm allowed to ask, how many people have been shortlisted to interviews, at least for like the undergraduate portion? And then in terms of the workload and the, I guess, feedback or evaluations for the course itself, would that be through like the people that you'd be working with, or would there be like a physical like written portion or something like that associated with the course as well?
Yeah. The first question, no, sorry, I am not answering that. Let's just say there's a lot more people interviewing than there are positions. But the course it's still an academic course. So this is something, if you do an MBA, you'll find that they have a course normally at the very end of their program called NGST 615. And it's simply where they go out and they do, they kind of do unstructured consulting, usually for some kind of a company. Whereas this course, we have a project. So you'll be working with predominantly not-for-profit companies. That's what we're expecting. And so you do have that as the major project, but then there is still an academic component to this course. We're setting this up to teach consulting, not just to send you out and give free consulting to a not-for-profit. So part of this course is to introduce Hastings students that want to get into the consulting industry. We want to introduce you guys to some of the major consulting firms in Calgary. So it's exposure. It's exposure for the consulting firms as well. And then there is an academic component to it where we have particular topics that we'll cover, and we'll bring in different consulting firms to do presentations on different topics. And so you'll get different people's takes. So sometimes in class, I'll say something, and then maybe later in the class we have a guest speaker come in, they contradict me. And you just got to understand, I don't mind. Like, that doesn't bother me. It doesn't threaten me. It's simply, sometimes we'll have different takes on different approaches, how we do things. I'm going to try to keep it a little more broad, but I expect when guest speakers come in, they're going to tell you specifically, here's how we do it. And that's beautiful. That gives you exposure. But you'll have reports that you have to write, that you submit to me, which is entirely separate from what you're giving the client.
All right, thank you.
Reagan?
Awesome. Yeah, Reagan.
Yeah, hey, I was just wondering, do you guys know when you guys will know, I guess, like the specific class time? Because I think I could probably speak for most people where some people might be looking for a placement in the fall semester. So they're kind of looking to potentially do this course and as well as fulfill their commitments of their internship. And then I guess secondly, I kind of missed the first half of the presentation from class. And I was just wondering if we were able to access the recording somehow after the fact.
So maybe Jessica, you can comment on the recording, but I think the idea is yes, right?
So the recording will be available on our website after this workshop is concluded. So it's the same website where you would have accessed the application to this course.
Awesome, thanks.
The first part of your question is extremely valid, and until the central registrar kicks out their schedule, I don't know when they kick that out, but I understand is that later in March is you get to schedule your classes, right? And so this is part of why, this is horrible timing to do interviews for me, but we wanted to get through this so that you had an idea, am I in this or not, before those schedules came out and you have to jump on it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So instead of the course schedule coming out and then us doing interviews to see, who's interested, we went the reverse. We just said, okay, let's identify people that, we want to make sure they make space in their schedule for this course. And as soon as we know, we'll definitely let you know. Okay.
I guess, so we'll probably know latest around when class registration starts, which I assume is like late March from what they released, I guess.
I'm hoping we get it a little bit before that, but I can't promise.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Course registration should be opening around March 28th, if it's correct on everyone's My U of C portal. So we are aiming to have it around then or earlier, like Phil said.
Cool, thanks.
Rashid?
Thanks. Is the course 615 that you talked about is a prerequisite or?
No, that's a great question, Rashid. Actually, I don't want you doing the same course in the same semester even, because they're very different approaches.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But no, it's not a requirement.
And do you suggest taking that because it's going to be offered in the spring? Is it going to be helpful or? No. Doesn't really relate.
Well, listen, Rashid, you might find it helpful in that you'll be out talking with a client. But if I remember right, I don't remember you being shy talking to clients, so I don't think you need that work. But you know what? For somebody, they may say that will help me deal with this. But in terms of structure, they're approached very differently, the two courses.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe. Thanks. I have a question regarding the 15-minute interview. I think it depends on if it's an undergrad or MBA student. They have 3 questions about the case and 1 behavioral question. I wonder what's your recommendation on how do we allocate the time? For example, for the quiz, for the case questions, if how much time we can have to prepare the answer, and like write down our answer, organize it, break it down, categorize it, and then how long we present our ideas for each question.
So the way I would frame it as, again, you don't want to think about it as a presentation, you want to think about it as a conversation. Okay. If somebody asks you a difficult question, it's okay to take a minute to think about it, gather your thoughts, and then answer. So typically, it's completely reasonable to be asked a question, take a minute, think through your ideas, and then start talking through it. Even if you have an incomplete answer, it's fine. You could start, you say, okay, some of the things that immediately come to mind are X, Y, Z, right? And as you talk through it, maybe you come up with some more, you put them together, right? But what you don't want to do is think of it as, this is an assignment, I have 10 minutes to do it and 5 minutes to present. That's not the right way to do it. It's a conversation. You want to walk the interviewer through your thought process. And that'll also help you, because if you make an incorrect assumption, they can correct you right then and there, and it'll save your case. Whereas if you take it as 10 minutes to present, 3 minutes into your presentation, they're like, oh, that's wrong. You have 2 minutes to fix your presentation now, right? So that's not an effective strategy. So I recommend considering it as a conversation and talking through how you're thinking and how you're approaching it, rather than just giving an answer. So you basically say, hey, looking at this chart, these are the ideas that come to mind. Okay, let me take a second. Okay, based on what I just told you, my recommendation now would be this, right? So you kind of talk me through what you're observing, what you're thinking, what you're solving, and then give them an answer as you go through it.
That sounds good. And if you have mentioned that in somewhere, sorry, I'm sorry, apologize.
No worries.
My question is, will you project the question on the screen, or like short case, we need to read it, or you just say it?
I think, Jessica, this is a question maybe you can answer.
We will be putting it on a slide deck and also be copying and pasting the question to the chat, so that I still recommend that you have a piece of paper and pen or something to type on, take notes though.
Okay, so you will present a short presentation and the answers in the chat. Okay, great, thanks.
It's very short.
All right, I think we only have time for one more question, so this will be it. Sushane?
Yeah, I have a very quick question. This is regarding the case interview. You know, when it's in person, you can at least, like when you're writing stuff on the paper, the interviewer can actually see what you're doing. But now with being online and on Zoom, I don't want to hold it up like that and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. So what do you suggest? What's the best way?
So this is where structured communication comes in handy. So to put this in context for everybody, when I first interviewed with McKinsey almost 5 years ago, 2 of my interviews back then were virtual. So being virtual with clients or interviews is not unusual. Just because it's happening more commonly during the COVID era doesn't mean it's that unusual. That being said, the way we typically encourage people to do it is, imagine the other person is blind, literally they're blind. How would you describe what's written on the page? So I would say, okay, well, I've made 3 buckets. The first bucket is this, second bucket is this, this is the third bucket. Going on to the first bucket, these are the things that I'm thinking about. Or you say, okay, I'm looking at the chart now. On the x-axis, there's this. On the y-axis, there's this. The trend that I see is going this direction. And you're basically assuming the person is blind, and you're kind of coaching them through visualizing it as if they were. That is typically a good approach. Obviously, you don't want to overdo it. Find your balance, but that's typically the best approach to manage not having to show everything. It's the same thing for your math. For your math, it's even more important. Don't do like, oh, well, I'm doing 3 times 2. Okay, that's 6. Okay, now I'm adding the, don't do that. Lay out the formula, the algebraic overarching approach, and then take a second, do your math, and say, okay, this is the way I've done it, right?
Thank you. One thing is like take visual cues, right? Like as much as it's tough to read, like you will see people responding to you. So if you're going too in depth, like take the visual cue and like jump to the next point. It like helps to calibrate.
Thanks so much.
All right. Well, I think we're a little over time. Thank you, everybody, for bearing through this with us. Hopefully it was valuable both for the upcoming interviews that you have and for any future aspirational consulting interviews that you may have in the future. Let us know if you have any other questions. Good luck in your interviews. Good luck in your courses. And looking forward to getting to know many of you more in the future.
Thank you. Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, Sammy and Suna. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to Mackenzie and Jessica as well for setting up.
Definitely Jessica. Thank you, Jessica, for organizing, and Mackenzie.